was applied to. So it's something to have in your back pocket if you want to uncover accounting fraud. Okay, the other thing is, considering that, again, the Madoff data was mostly composed of S&P 100 stocks with some derivative aspects, you should see a very high correlation between the Madoff return and the S&P 100. And this is just a simple scatter plot where, you can see, for instance, that when you look at the scatter comparing the S&P 500 to the S&P 100, again, we're talking most of those two portfolios are pretty similar. There's a fairly high correlation that you see on the scatter plot. But when you correlate the Madoff returns with either of those two, there's virtually no correlation. So, and this again was one of the tests that Markopoulos did that he said it, proved that, he couldn't possibly have made the investments he said he was making. Okay, so some conclusions are that simple graphs and descriptive statistics could have been applied to Madoff return data by the financial institutions that were recommending Madoff hedge funds to their clients. Virtually all of them would have shown that the Madoff data deviates significantly from statistical patterns for similar assets. In fact, I believe they would just have shown that this can't possibly be. I have on this overhead, just for your amusement, if you want to hear Markopoulos interviewed in a podcast, this was one where he's pretty harsh criticism of the Securities and Exchange Commission because he went to them a number of times with information like what you saw here, and they just completely blew him off. Now, one of the things I want to add here is, if I am to believe an article that appeared in Bloomberg a few months ago, some of the financial managers did suspect that this data was too good to be true, that there was some kind of fraud involved. But apparently what they thought was that Madoff was, quote unquote, front-running the market, and front-running is a kind of insider trading where you sort of have some information on where an investment is going to go before it actually happens, so you can get there in front of the market and make some extra money. So apparently, they didn't look, Markopoulos convinced himself that this wasn't front-running, it was actually fake data. But you have these other managers who thought, oh yeah, it's too good to be true, but he's front-running. He has some little sneaky cheating thing he's doing that will get me a better return. I'll just, pretend I'm not seeing it. If that hypothesis is true, and I think it could be hard to prove, but that could be why they were, as far as I'm concerned, incompetent. Because some of these people are highly paid, financial analysts that did not do simple tests. So that might be one reason why they didn't do due diligence on this data. Only they know. But it's, sort of one of the hypotheses, I think, given what I'm, what you saw on these graphs and simple tests, that might explain some of it. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the mortgage crisis, and I'm going to be showing some simple descriptive statistics and models that could have predicted, that trouble was coming. Okay, now, one of the things is I pretty much was limited to data that was publicly available. There is a website, this is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. So there's a federal website, a federal government website that you go to download this data. This is just showing you the home page of the HMDA. I just call it HMDA as an acronym. And these are the variables that are in the data. So there is things like the purpose of the loan, whether it was for a residential mortgage or refinancing, the type of property, whether it was like a single-family home or some other type of an investment property, or there are a few categories. Whether the home is owner-occupied, what the amount of the loan was, what the action was. In other words, was it approved? I mean, the two big categories were approved and non-approved, but there were a few others. There's also the applicant's income is one of the variables collected, and then there is census tract number, where that can be used to hook into a zip code database, and you'll see later on I do some things with some zip code data also. And they're also, in addition to whether or not the loan was approved, they have some, if the loan was denied, they have a few variables that collect some reasons for the denial. And this is actually showing one of the pages that you go to actually start downloading some data. Now, one of the things I will mention is there is a free tool called Data Ferret that you can get off of the government's website that helps you download data from government databases. And something like 6 to 9 months ago, you could access HMDA data from Data Ferret. It's no longer one of the data series you can access from Data Ferret. And, the conspiracy theorist part of me is, amused by that, let's just say. And the other thing I would say, this data, I have done a little bit of my research is showing that some of the cities and some of the people who are now suing the various parties who got them mixed up in some of these loans, some of them have been using HMDA data to back up their case. Okay, this is just showing a little bit of descriptive information. Now, one of the things, I have a co-author on this paper, but one of the things we decided to do was to slice out, because this is a fairly big database, to slice out a state that had a problem and a state that didn't have a problem. And my co-author works for a company that has a subsidiary that does some mortgage fraud analysis. So she went to some of the people there, and we originally thought Florida would be one of the good states to be an example of, bad things happening, and they agreed. We also got some data from South Dakota and Nebraska. They were examples of states that didn't have nearly the magnitude of problem that, say, Florida and Nevada did. So there are just a couple of, some descriptive statistics from a couple of the numeric variables in the data. The first one is loan amount, applicant income, and then rate spread, which is I believe is the spread over a risk-free rate. And you can see that it gets to be very high. At the 95th percentile, the spread is 8%.